So, one of the big news items that's been really just percolating throughout the past several months, if not the past year, and if not recently, is a lot of the changes going on at Warner Bros. Discovery by David Zaslav and his crew. One of the more recent changes is they have decided to cancel the Zatanna movie, the DC Zatanna movie or series, but not cancel it entirely to the point that it's never going to see the light of day. Instead, they're going to continue with it, but shop it around to other networks. Excuse me. And the obvious question that a lot of folks have had, from an obvious standpoint, being on the outside looking in, is why is David and his crew doing this? Why are they canceling shows, not outright, but just to the point that they're going to sell them off to other places to be showcased? What's going on? Well, I think I've talked about this before in a video, but let me elaborate more on why. You see, along with the shopping around, the licensing out of all these shows and stuff and movies that they still want to allow to see the light of day, along with all that, and the cut and the layoffs, unfortunate layoffs of people working at the studio and the different divisions, the shutdown of one studio and the merger of many others. The reason they're doing all this is to save money so they can pay off their debt that the recent regime before them put them into, probably the biggest debt they've been in the studio's existence. So they're doing what they can to save up money and build up money, enough to pay off these debts. And part of that plan is to shop around a lot of programs and shows that originally were meant for HBO Max, if not the Warner Media network of networks like TNT, TBS, CEW, HBO itself, Cinemax, you name it. Cartoon Network, Boomerang. They're now deciding to sell these off to other places because David Zaslav, as I think I've mentioned in another video, basically is going by an old school mentality. You see, when he was probably getting into the business, one of the things he was taught right off the bat is if you get into a scenario like this, always go in this direction. Always go in this direction of looking at other places that might be willing to buy the rights to air that movie or air that series on your behalf. And that's what he's doing here. He's taken a lot of these movies and shows that still are potentially going to see the light of day, but he's looking at places like Apple TV Plus, Disney Plus, he's looking at Paramount Plus, he's looking at Netflix, Crackle, Amazon Prime Video, Hulu. He's looking at all of them, and potentially more, like Funimation maybe, and Retro Crush. He's looking at all these potential places and saying, okay, what could we sell to each and every one of them that would fit the status quo, or that they'd be willing to air as part of the lineup. And Zatanna recently is now on that list. Zatanna is now recently on that list of potential shows / movies that will end up elsewhere. But who would take it? Well, more than likely, if I'm Netflix and I want something that's going to garner people's attention, not only am I looking at Batman Caped Crusader as a potential show I'm going to bring on board, I'm also looking at the Zatanna movie / series that I want to bring on board as well. So they're looking at those two properties and saying, hey, if I want to get a heads up on Amazon Prime and the Lord of the Rings Ring of Power deal, and even a heads up on HBO and HBO Max and the House of Dragon stuff, I want to get my hands on these. So they're looking at shows like that, and they're not alone. Apple TV Plus, Disney Plus, Hulu, every streaming service that I mentioned is also looking into these shows and movies to be part of their service. But the question is, how much is Warner Brothers willing to take as payment, as an offer for these to be licensed? That's the big question. That's the big question, because there's a lot of work going into this, or not into this basically specifically, but into these projects is what I'm trying to say. A lot of time and effort is going into these projects to where you would think Warner Brothers would come out and say, well, we're offering to sell you the rights to the movie or the show that you want, but for this amount, because this is how much it took for us to make it. So let's say Batman Cape Crusader, at the end of the day, cost maybe $10 million, $50 million, almost $1 billion. I wouldn't say $1 billion, but probably half of $1 billion, $50 million to make, from an animation perspective. And let's say Netflix, who people say have the money to do it, look at it and say, oh, that's chump change for us. Here's $50 million for it. Thank you. And they'll put it on the program. Same with Zatanna. Zatanna might be a little bit more because it's live action, the series and the movie. And they might say, oh, this cost us about $1 billion. Company like Netflix could be like, here you go. Or a company like Disney could be like, or Paramount. If they have the funds, they will do it. And I think that's going to be kind of the obstacle that a lot of these streaming services will look at to try to overcome, and Warner Brothers in turn would hope they would overcome as well, because they're gonna basically want to sell them the rights to show these movies and shows, but at the price that's equal to what they had to basically put money basically at a price that's equal to the money they had to put out to make it. So that's what I was trying to say. But yeah, in the end, this is why a lot of these shows and movies are being canceled, not outright, but just being canceled from being shown on HBO Max and HBO period, and being sold off to these other places. It's because of the fact that, along with, as I said, the mergers and other things that are going on, the layoffs, all this is being done so they can build up enough money to pay off their debts, so that at the end of the day, the plan will be, once they get everything in order, they get these debts, these major portions of the debts paid off, they could potentially look at bringing those shows back in some capacity, shows and movies back to their streaming service, whatever it's going to be next year, and showcase them there, not just exclusively yet, but in a shared partnership with whoever they license it out to for the time, and then eventually, exclusively on the service once everything is in order. That's why they're doing this. They're doing this because they're building up the money, the refunds, if you will, to pay off the debts they need to pay off, so that when things do get in order, they will be able to basically bring these shows and movies back to their service, and potentially down the line make them exclusive to their service. But again, that's just speculation on my part and anybody else's part. But it does feel like that's the direction they want to go in. At the end of the day, that feels like the direction they want to go in at the end of the day. But what do you guys think? What are your thoughts on the fact that David Zaslav and his team are selling off these properties, doing all these moves and layoffs and everything, but mostly selling off these properties, to these, and licensing them out to these other streaming services and networks? What are your thoughts about it being part of this overall arcing plan to build up money so they could basically pay off the debts they need? And do you think it's eventually going to lead to them bringing those shows and movies back to the service over time, once things are basically put into place, or basically settled down, if you will? Let me know what your thoughts are. Comment if you like. Love to hear from each and every one of you. Like the video. Super chat, super stickers are open in the live chat donor premiere. Super thanks afterwards. Also check me out at patreon.com/BWRoses, the $1, $3 tier. Venmo at Brian-Warmer-2, and at Cash App at BWRoses98. Also check me out at DeviantArt.com/BVW1979, at BWRoses Discussions, all your favorite audio podcast locations except for Pandora. Also check me out at VENMO at BWRoses for content you can't get anywhere else, and at my Teespring store as well for merchandise you can't get anywhere else. But let me know what your thoughts are, guys. Love to hear from each and every one of you on this. And until then, I am out.